Excited about tonight's show. We're going to be welcoming the Athletics' Mike Sando to talk about Josh Allen's ascension, the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl aspirations, expectations for the rest of the season. But first, our guys at Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. We're joining your host, Greg Thompson, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron, you got a new setup. I like it.
Yeah, well, this room that I am in, it's actually a playroom / guest room when I do have people. There's a bed set up over here somewhere. But it has been under a construction zone actually for the last 3 months, and it's finally wrapping up here. So I'm trying to find a good home for my setup. And now here I am. I no longer have to have my camera set up. So when I'm typing, I'm not shaking anymore for people that have watched for a long time. So they'll appreciate that.
They'll find something.
I see the YouTube comments. I see the hate. I'm trying to improve. Bye weeks of time for self-scouting people. Cut me some slack here. But yes, no, I'm excited. It's time to self-scout and get better at what we do, right, Greg?
Absolutely. And we're in an interesting spot now because we talked about this gauntlet at the beginning of the season. The Bills have somehow, gone through that 5-1. We're coming off this huge win against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. The Bills are sitting as the number 1 seed, and we wanted to step back. We're going to do some different elements of who we think is impacting that movement, where we think the players' values are going, what we maybe think some of the record things are going to be the rest of the year. But we wanted to bring somebody in from the outside to have a little perspective on, not our homerism and how we view
maybe
this
calm
team.
us down a little bit.
Maybe somebody who's a little more reasonable to come in and talk to us. And I'm very, very excited that this gentleman's able to make some time for us here. Mike Sando of The Athletic. Mike, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. For anyone who isn't familiar, Mike is obviously a fantastic contributor for The Athletic, hosts the Football GM podcast with Randy Mueller, lots of different fantastic written content. But one that we're going to check out tonight and talk a little bit about is one of my favorite research pieces every offseason, the quarterback tiers. So it goes through and 50 different executives, coaches, GMs, different leaders throughout the NFL going through it. And you get them to grade every single quarterback in the NFL and consolidate that together. Obviously, we're a lot more excited to read that each year now as we have a quarterback who's praised in those exercises. But Mike, welcome. We'll get into some of our questions here in a bit. But how are things? How is life in the NFL 6 weeks in?
It's great. I enjoy every season. This is my 25th season covering the league, which means I'm a little bit older. And obviously I was a fan before that. I was a season ticket holder for the Raiders many years ago. How about that? Not a lot of people know that. Grew up a Raider fan. 51.
How do you feel about the Vegas?
51-3 was tough. I remember that day. The Bills teams were so great. I mean, in that era. What do I think of what Vegas?
What do you feel about the Vegas move? I haven't got to talk to a Raiders fan.
Well, here's the deal. I could have never understood
this. 51-3. This is right behind.
Yeah, one size.
That's the perfect response.
It really was.
It's funny. I went from being a season ticket holder of the Raiders to covering the Seahawks the next year. That was the first year, and so once you start covering the league, I would have never thought this is possible. I'd stop being a fan because the fan to me is a lifestyle. You're around that team. I was so into it. But when I made the professional shift and now I'm covering it every day, and obviously there's a journalistic component of, but there's a distance. Right. So I still have the affinity that I have for the players of the era that I followed, but since then, I don't have any, when the Raiders are playing now, you could have never told me this is possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so into it. I was living in Washington State, making no money when they moved back to Oakland from LA. I grew up in Northern California. Me and my neighbor in Sacramento at the time, when I grew up with, each bought a ticket. I borrowed it was $1,000 for the whole season. I borrowed from my mom I used to fly home on Southwest and go to the games. I walked from the airport to the stadiums. I mean, I was so into it. And it's just amazing that as you go on covering it, the distance between that and what you do now gets to such a point that you don't have any of those feelings anymore. It's just a weird thing, but I can't complain. I get to go to games. I go to, I've been to hundreds of NFL games, been to Super Bowls, all that stuff, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
It's probably still obviously fun to love football. It's a great game. It's so exciting to be able to do. Aaron and I talk about it a lot that we get to be objective. We get to be analytical. We like to give people a little more insight and breakdown of what they're watching, but I don't have to hide my fandom. I'm not a journalist. I am
like my
fan.
children, right? I love my kids, but I can still like tell you that they're being jerks, right? Like I can still be objective about my kids, but I love them. At the end of the day, I can gush about them, right?
Yeah, I think it's a different era too. There's more people in the tent of coverage, right? And it's like, hey, just if you feel one way or something, as long as you're disclosing it, right? Hey, you're a fan,
exactly,
and you're still going to be judged for, if you're too homery, then everyone's going to notice. You're going to lose credibility.
If you never give any critical analysis,
I will say, my wife has called me a homer for years, and the way that I talk about the Bills now, I'm like, it's hard to say you objectively cover the Bills, but also not sound like a homer, if that makes sense.
Well,
like,
they're good.
Exactly, they're very good, right?
Yeah.
Let's lead right.
So let's talk about how good they are, right? Because the piece this year on the QB tiers. If you haven't read it, it'll be in the show description here. Go check that out. We'll have a link in the show description. Josh Allen was in tier 1. First of all, I love that it's in tiers because we've had this debate going into the week of who's better, Mahomes or Allen. And my argument is like, why are we Neanderthals and arguing things in individual ranks? Like everything should belong in a tier because there's so much context, so much nuance that goes into this, right? So I appreciate that you're leading this movement of putting things into nice tiers instead. Within this tier, you had Josh Allen fourth at 1.22 behind Rodgers, Mahomes, and Brady. This far into the season, what you have seen, do you believe that we would revisit the Josh Allen tier in any way?
Yeah, I think that he would be above Brady at this point. It's looking at it even now. I'm like, oh, so he got 50 votes, 39 in tier 1, 11 tier 2. He just doesn't. It seems like he was tier 1 last year. So I think. Over his career, he had some inconsistency in his play early, had the struggles, whatever. So it takes, a little bit of an extra. It's sort of like you make the Pro Bowl, where they say a year after you should have, and then you get to stay in the Pro Bowl or the year after. Yeah. I think for someone like Mahomes, who came in so clean, like he instantly was highly efficient. And you know what I mean? He instantly was like, so he went like all the way to the top floor faster, and I think Josh Allen at one point after year 2, he was in tier 3 probably, there were questions about him. So, and I think he has now, there has been, a little rough around the edges here or there, but I think the way he finished last season to me and in the playoffs, like I would have had a hard time leaving him out of it. So I think there's no question, now that I would imagine that he'll be, he may be unanimous. He may go to unanimous.
I was just going to say, if anything,
he'll probably go unanimous next year.
Yeah, those 12 people were waiting to say, "Hey, are we sure that how we
playoff performance? Is the playoff performance something that's sustainable, or like that he can get close to that ceiling consistently, right?" And I think now that we are seeing that, in this same conversation about these QB tiers and sort of looking at, it's fun to even in this early hindsight to go back and look at it. The QBs within the division, I'm super interested whenever I see somebody else writing about QBs, because obviously the discussion on Twitter among Bills fans, Bills content creators, and the other teams' content creators, it's a hard conversation to have. So I'm ready for you to have this conversation with us. Looking at Tua, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, sort of hanging out in the same area of tiers. Have they moved for anybody at all? And let's include Bailey Zappi in here, since I'm trying to get this quarterback controversy in New England thing to exist. Can you include him in the sort of AFC East QBs?
Yeah. So Zach Wilson was in tier 4, which is, there's 2 ways to get into tier 4. You can be, because I've played 10 years and we know you're not that good and we don't want you to play the whole year, and you're Ryan Fitzpatrick or Joe
Flacco,
a good backup. Yeah. or a tier 4 could be, we don't have enough information. And I think Zach Wilson at this stage of his career is probably a little bit of both, and so he was in tier 4. I think he was the 4th guy in tier 4. It went Justin Fields at the top, to Davis Mills, Zach Wilson. I don't see how you could change anything on Zach Wilson right now. I mean, hasn't played much. He's been a little up and down. Their pass offense was terrible this last week. So I think you got to see him. Tua, I think, was definitely going to move into tier 3. But look, availability is part of it too,
Sure.
And so he hasn't proven with any consistency week in and week out, even in the games that they won. They've won the Baltimore game, but they're way behind. So I think people probably feel a little bit better about what he can do now that there's a good offensive schemer there and some weapons. But he still has to, I think, climb into solid tier 3 and push towards tier 2 by playing well over the course of the rest of the season, which is no guarantee. So I think that's for him. Who am I missing?
And then the Mac.
Bailey, Mac Jones.
Mac
Jones. So Mac Jones was in tier 3. And I think people felt like with him coming out, that's kind of what he was, right? He was almost
right.
More
He
of a
at the ceiling
product.
already. Yeah,
and maybe could ascend into that lower tier 2 where you sort of go back and forth like a Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins can look really good, but then the minute you think he's tier 2, you see, you're right back in tier 3. I think Bailey Zappi is interesting, and I think with a lot of organizations, if you had something like this happen, let's just say Bailey Zappi has a couple more good games.
Yeah, Bears should have a pretty good game there.
Yeah, let's just say though, you would have camps in the organization of, hey, you know what, the GM drafted Mac Jones, the coach is like this guy. In New England, there's none of that. Bill Belichick did it all. Bill Belichick can move on from Mac Jones if he wants to. He can make an actual decision based on, what, I think Bailey Zappi looks better. I mean, he did it with Tom Brady and Drew Bledsoe, which is a different situation, but similar in that, you had an established starter, and then you had someone who was picked very late, and you saw things in that guy, Tom Brady, that made you want to start him. They didn't know he was going to be a Hall of Famer. I mean, that's
right.
Totally out of the question, but he made a decision at that time that, I want to see more of this. And I don't know that we're to that point with Bailey Zappi by any means. I'm not saying that, but I think he's in the mix. I mean, I think he's played himself into being relevant there. And if Mac Jones were to come back and struggle,
be very quick hook.
I am all for building up this as a controversy. So whatever we can say, just
you think it under why? Why do you even care? They're not even in your realm.
I'll tell you why I care. Oh, no, I get it. But I'll tell you real quick personally, and I got to hand you off to Greg here in a second. But I'm from New England, and I'm a Bills fan, and everyone in my life is a New England fan. So the things that they did to me during the Trent Edwards, Losman years, this is just scar tissue. I'm just unleashing. It's therapy for me
Jeff
to unleash
Toole,
on these people.
EJ Manuel.
You thought this day would never come.
It's a lot to unpack.
Literally.
Yeah. And not only does it come, it's come in a very fun way. So, but let's talk about another guy that's maybe heading toward a possible Hall of Fame resurrection career. Geno Smith at the bottom of your tiers list. Absolutely unbelievable. I had to find a way to give him his flowers here while I had you on here. When I was rechecking that list, going through hindsight, seeing Geno Smith down there, I would have had him down there at the bottom of the list. Can you talk about what he's done?
Yeah, he should have been there because based on what we had seen, right? I think when Seattle made the trade of Russell Wilson, they knew that Geno Smith was at least a solid backup, and they wanted to look at Drew Lock because they thought he still had some upside, and then they were probably going to draft a quarterback or make a move for one next year. That's why they have the draft picks. So then Drew Lock had a really bad preseason game, bad ball security, the same stuff we've seen from him. I think he missed a preseason game with an injury. And so Geno Smith came in. They said he's going to start the season. First couple games, Pete Carroll plays the game as if Geno Smith is the last guy in quarterback tiers. I mean, they're very conservative. Don't lose the game.
Yeah.
But they started to see things with him where they were like, Pete even said it after the second game. He's like, look, we can do some more. And so they started letting him throw the ball more downfield and putting it more in his hands. And he's been excellent. He's done things at the line of scrimmage. I think what we've seen here is Russell Wilson, for as good as he was, limited the offense in other ways. He was not somebody who saw it well as a drop back passer or was at the line of scrimmage making a bunch of checks. he was somebody who was an elite competitor who had really great athleticism with a great arm and the
Some
ability
fantastic
to
wide receivers.
throw
too.
the deep ball. But if you watch Russell Wilson 4 or 5 years ago, cat quick, athletic, the minute you think you have him, he runs for 20 yards. I mean, he was a dynamic player all the way around, but there were things that were limited and shut off in the offense too that we didn't really talk about. Okay. So Geno Smith comes in and he's not as dynamic running around, obviously, although he's not bad, but he is making the checks. He is seeing the whole field. They have tight ends catching the ball up the seam for touchdowns in ways that we didn't see before.
Areas of the field that were never
Yeah,
used.
right.
Yeah,
true.
so this world has opened up, and Geno Smith has been accurate, poised. It hasn't been one of these things where they've just play actioned it and fooled the defense, and he's got good stats. He's played great. So they had a little bit of a tougher game against Arizona this last week. Arizona plays them tough usually. One of those division matchups. Yeah. But it's very intriguing. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I just have to tip my cap to him because I think when you don't play for a long time, you are what we last saw. And I think this guy's been a professional and learned and waiting his time and looks pretty good.
So let's switch over a little bit more to the team view of some of the things there. Obviously, Bills fans are seeing everything coming at them in waves. I think Aaron Schatz had them as the first team in, almost 18 years to be number one in defense and number one in offense. They're now in some of the different metrics, like breaking some of the gambling analytics of like, hey, what spreads do we put on games here? I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be the biggest underdog that he's ever been in a game.
Yeah.
Whether you look at the betting favorites, the expectations, how real do you think these Buffalo Bills Super Bowl aspirations are? Do you think that it's
incredibly
obviously,
real.
not necessarily that it's nothing's ever guaranteed. The best team doesn't win most seasons, sadly. But you think that it's justified in the way they're being
completely
talked about.
Yeah. So if you just go by, EPA, they're number 2 offense, number 4 defense, number 7 special teams. So it's usually really hard to have a great quarterback and be top in defense special teams. When you have those two things to come together, you have what New England had for all those years. Okay. Yeah. And I did a piece earlier maybe right before the season, looking at 17 long-term relationships between teams and their quarterbacks. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I looked for commonalities of how do you have the good quarterback and how do you still be good on defense and special teams? Because if you look at Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers or Peyton Manning, the reason they only will get to 1 Super Bowl or 2 or, win way fewer is because a lot of times they're bottom 5 or 10 in the league in defense special teams. And you can overcome it in a given year, but you're just set up to be that team that loses in the playoffs because you get a punt blocked or you can't stop them, right? And Justin Herbert is now going through that with the Chargers.
Great example.
So here were the franchises that did it best, and the bells are going to go off in Bills fans' head when they see this. Baltimore with Flacco. Flacco wasn't great, but they stayed good on defense special teams the whole time he was there, okay? Mm-hmm. Wilson in Seattle. McNabb and Reed in Philly, Brady Belichick in New England, and Roethlisberger and the Steelers. So if you look at those 5 organizations, they combined for, let me see here, 18, 23, 28 appearances in the conference finals, and I believe 16 Super Bowls, okay? And when you look at those teams, they almost all had defensive cultures. 4 of the 5 had defensive head coaches, if you count John Harbaugh. I know he's special teams. Andy Reid had Jim Johnson, who was a great defensive coordinator, and that's where Sean McDermott comes from. Yep. And they were coaches who, with the exception of Andy Reid, Tomlin, Belichick, Pete Carroll, John Harbaugh, they are not offensive play callers, not even play callers. They coach the whole team. Mm-hmm. And they create a culture of defense around their organization while having Ben Roethlisberger, while having Tom Brady, right? While having these upper tier quarterbacks. When you can have those two things together, you're going to be in the mix every year. Now, you still have to maximize your opportunities. I felt like last year they should have won the Super Bowl, the Bills. They had 2 4 seeds go to the Super Bowl that weren't as good as Buffalo.
And they were healthy for the most part too.
That's the randomness of football, but we've seen teams like the 49ers had a good team. They didn't have Josh Allen, but they had that good team that lost in the NFC Championship game to the Giants, right? That was their chance. So you have to still maximize the chances like we're talking about. But what team more than Buffalo fits into that Pittsburgh, New England, Seattle, Baltimore group? There's no one. They've got McDermott is that coach, right? I mean, they have Frazier calling the plays. They have the elite quarterback. So what more do you think they need to have? You can say within that, we wish they had a better running game or whatever. You can find some things you'd want to have, but like the vital signs are all there to be that team.
Yeah, I love that. And it also seems like this sort of internally they're developing the right way, right? Like if there's that bringing in Daboll and then getting Dorsey and everybody's worried what happens with Frazier, they continue to keep that culture going.
And then when they lost him, brought in Joe Brady as the new quarterback coach, which is very obvious. If Dorsey gets a quick ascension, you now have a guy in the same system, the same idea, the same preparation.
Yeah. You're going to start getting picked
really,
over
really
now.
good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. So, I think all the fundamentals are really solid for them, and that's what makes them real.
And so now we kind of all agree that Super Bowl aspiration is real. You just came out, as sort of Greg alluded to it, that early gauntlet of the schedule. You look at the rest of the schedule, the 11 remaining games here. There's not a ton of tough, at least on paper, matchups for them. What are you looking for them to solidify their standing as this top dog heading into the playoffs throughout the remaining games coming out of the bye?
Tennessee can't be the number one seed, okay?
Yeah.
Be the number one seed, get home field advantage.
Let's
take all that out. And so I think the great teams, and I think I admire Kansas City this year. I know they lost to the Bills, but I think they've been a team that's been motivated every week. You know what I mean? I mean, they heard the whole narrative of Tyreek Hill and then came out and just rolled a couple people, right? They didn't beat the Bills, but
that Tampa Bay game scared the crap out of me.
Absolutely.
They've got the edge about them, right?
Yep.
And I think that
just keep that 2-game lead on them.
So exactly, you have to keep going. Don't have the Jacksonville game last year, right? Now you're going to lose some games here or there. That's going to happen. But I think really having that attention to detail. So you beat Pittsburgh by 35 points, but in that game you missed a couple touchdown passes that were open. No one needs to talk about that. That's nitpicking, but they need to be on it, right?
They are.
They need to be like, you need to stay on it when everyone's telling you you're great. And I think the sting of last season gave them a lot of that.
Back to a couple years of hardship, right? A couple years of hardship.
You got to keep it the whole year. Yeah. You got to keep the edge the whole year because you don't know what's going to happen.
A lot of football.
You don't know what's going to happen next year or whatever, right? I mean, your quarterback could get hurt next year in camp, and there goes a year or whatever. You have to.
I just knocked on wood for all of us.
Yeah. But those things happen to teams. Tom Brady, 2007 season, the greatest season ever, and then they get solved in the playoffs, and then 2008 ACL the first game. And then they go through a few years where they weren't quite as good on defense. And then all of a sudden you look up and it's like, oh, they haven't won a Super Bowl in, all these years, right? That's how hard it is. So you have to really maximize when you're in this window.
Yeah.
We joke about it a lot that there's no coach better suited for this to still serve out that humble pie in film breakdown than Sean McDermott. Like there was the dumb penalties, the dumb turnovers,
every week.
Ugly, sloppy play in, crazy 38-3 blowouts. I'm like, oh, that's fine. McDermott will still serve up humble pie. It'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to do that. So, you love where they're at. But football there's no best of 7 series.
It'll humble you.
Best of 7 series, you got to like the Bills, right?
Right.
You got to like them anyway, but one game.
Any other risks that stand out to you that you think they need to be concerned with?
You guys will know this better than me from afar, just the conventional running game part of it. I felt like by the end of last year, Josh Allen is so special and just so physical. But man, he was running a lot and diving a lot, and like he's not going to just suddenly wear down. But he was running at the red line. He runs at the red line a bit, and it would be nice to have some easier games against some good teams because other components of the offense can pick it up, right? And so I don't know where they're at on that. I mean,
We talk about it a fair amount that I think that it's Aaron Cromer still developing the offensive line and getting this running game going. That Devin Singletary is actually a better running back than most people realize. I think we haven't really tapped into anything of what James Cook has available. Don't get me wrong. I'd love a shiny new Saquon or Christian McCaffrey, just like anybody else, but you're not going to solve something that if the holes aren't there, or the yards before contact metrics aren't great. I think that anything that gets solved is going to need to be solved there. And then the guys we have would be good. And sure, if you have some elite athlete that you traded for, that could be even better. But ultimately, this is a pass first, pass second, pass third team, no matter who you put back there.
Yeah, and there's some extension of the pass, or there's some extension of the run game that bleeds into the pass game a little bit. And I think the big thing for me is the short yardage stuff. They actually have looked okay in some of the explosive, regular, neutral running things. It's 3rd and 1, and then you have to use Josh because he's the only weapon that works. If they can clean that up, then I think that run game becomes much more efficient.
That may be it, and maybe you get lucky at some point, just hit on a superstar back, who just boom, hits some home runs.
One of these third rounders that just hits,
just hits on that. I think that is a real bonus. You're not going to obviously have a running team, but it would sure be nice to have a 50-yard run every once in a while. Yeah, and we'll see. But I'd rather have what they've got than have that and not have what they got.
I hear you.
Much better to have that alternative. And people have asked all the time, even when I've talked about some of the trade targets and things that get thrown out there, I care way more about how do they pass protect? What are they in the screen game? What are they as a weapon out of the backfield? I've made the case that if they were going to do something, the former pro personnel director, Dan Morgan is now the assistant GM in Carolina. You still have the connections between Bean and McDermott. They did that weird restructure that somehow teams can now afford McCaffrey for $1.035 million. There's a lot of things that if for some reason they were going to do that, I don't care about running the ball. I'd rather pass the ball 85% of the time. If you're going to add somebody, give me the guy who's had 1,000-yard receiving seasons.
Well, I'll tell you though, Christian McCaffrey as a receiver is a dynamic component. If you watch him, I don't know if it was the last game, might have been a game before, but I mean, he's running he's running a receiver route. I think it was in there. They played a terrible game, and it was against Arizona or somebody, but he run. That's dynamic now.
He'd be the best slot receiver for the Bills.
Yeah, I would love to see. Maybe that's dreaming, but they were over the top aggressive to get Von Miller. That was one of the things I wrote about. They guaranteed 3 years. Yeah. So
it looks good now, but
I was going to say, I feel like you can play all 3 now.
in the moment, I feel better about it right now than I did 5 months ago.
You got to risk it though a little bit, and so I don't know if they can get Christian McCaffrey, but but let's just say if you could, is there a reason you wouldn't? Are you thinking, we can't part with a second round pick?
Oh no, we're burning everything. Go all in and burn.
Right. I mean, what price is too high?
None.
Now, would you feel like you'd have a great plan to bring them in? I mean,
I do think that we've been banging at it for years about the lack of a screen game. And this year we've seen it, that Dorsey has really introduced a screen game. So that's exciting. We've been hammering at Josh about, hey, it's okay to check the ball down. Well, if you're checking down to somebody like McCaffrey, that's a very dynamic weapon. People will bring up, oh, well, didn't we just draft James Cook? And don't get me wrong, I'm excited about the possibility.
He can wait a little bit too.
Besides him waiting and developing, even the most optimistic scouting reports, his ceiling in those scouting reports isn't on the same tier as Christian McCaffrey is. That's just an unfair expectation.
Yeah. Here's the thing though, when you do that, now maybe this is a good problem to have, but hey, you suffer a tough loss or you pull out the game, and one of the questions is, hey, Coach McDermott, you only got 7 touches for Christian today, because look, it may be going a different direction, right? He's not. You're not going to come in and make it the Christian McCaffrey offense.
No. But there's gravity there, even on non-touches, right?
You have to plan for a weapon like that.
There's no doubt about it. So if he really wanted to come in and knew that that's going to be the role, and some days we're just going to pass it every play, and you might catch 7 balls for 97 yards, but you might have 8 carries.
I think they're not
Yeah,
going to do
sounds fair.
anything at running
Most
back.
likely. The
And
most likely
they-
outcome is they play with
And
what they
the
got.
other thing that's going to happen is over this next 11 games, that running game is going to get inflated against bad teams, and it ultimately is going to look better than it was in real situations, and nothing's going to change with.
And
how
then
they
we'll go back
approach
to the
running
playoffs,
back.
and they won't run the ball anymore.
And they won't run the ball,
Yeah,
and
anyways.
we're going to live and die with Josh Allen. But
Yeah.
within that context, I want to know, we do this to everyone every bye week when we bring on guests and get their sort of prediction. We put them on the spot. But since we don't have a game, I want your record prediction here heading to the end of the season. Where are these Bills? 5-1 right now, heading into the
5-1.
bye.
So I have their schedule right in front of me. Let's just.
I was
go
going to say,
through it,
look at this
okay?
schedule because it looks pretty good
So
for us.
I'm going to
Yeah.
say, oh my gosh.
Thank you.
There's
So
not a ton of obvious
here's
losses.
what I say. Here's what I say.
There's going to be a lot
I
of big
will-
spreads too.
I will give them. Let's just say they stumble at New England.
Somewhere.
Let's just
yeah.
say that. Okay, that's
Sure.
a lot. A division loss. So that would take them. They're 5-1, 6, 7, 8, 9. They'd be 10-1. So let's say they go 10-2, and then 11-2 Jets. I think they're not going to lose to Miami and Buffalo
Especially not after how
I
the
think
in
first
they're
game
December.
Yeah.
Does
I
that
think
get
they're
you to
going to rip
12,
Miami apart
13?
when they see him again.
in Cincinnati's a good enough team where that game could matter more to Cincinnati than it does Buffalo at that point.
So
If
yeah,
Burrow gets
so,
going, if that offense gets going at some point here,
so let's say they lose one of the last two, and
Sure.
let's say they lose. We'll just pick the New England game, but let's
Sure.
just you're
For
going to lose.
stats, yeah.
Shoot, what would you have said last year? You would have said, okay, they beat Jacksonville. You're going to have.
I thought 12,
they handle
12 to
Atlanta, and that
13
was an
gets
ugly
the
game.
1 seed was always my thing. Right around 13 gets you the 1.
Yeah, I feel like we're that old Saturday Night Live skit about the Bears. They're predicting could Ditka
That's what I'm
versus a bus.
This
and
we
they're like,
sound
Ditka,
like homers. We're
What if
covering
the
the hurricane.
hurricane was named
Mike, I swear to
Hurricane?
God.
Yes, that's what
Mike.
we're doing. Okay, what if McDermott? What if it was Hurricane McDermott? We're like undefeated. They're
I
never gonna lose
promise.
again.
I promise we're not homers. You got to come some year when we're not good and watch how objective we
Yes,
can be.
we
but right now is
predicted
not
some
the
ugly
time to
records
see
and
that.
with
That's
some
great.
losses.
No, but
It's
I mean,
hard now.
The thing is, I think there was a point too, like at a certain point a couple weeks ago, the Philadelphia Eagles were favored in each of the rest of their games. Okay,
Yeah.
but they're going to lose 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
They just are.
They're going to stop.
I think Buffalo is better than that, so they probably won't lose that many. But weird things can happen in a game, and
For sure.
and we see it every week. Shoot, Tampa Bay just beat the Steelers. What would you
Yeah,
have bet
yeah.
on that
Oh
game?
God.
Just straight
Yeah.
up. If you could have had straight up odds.
That
You would have
ended,
bet
any of those
anything.
survivor pools and things like that. The fact that Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett played keep away from Tom Brady and just didn't give him the ball back.
Weird.
Yeah, a
Unbelievable.
month ago,
Football's weird.
if we had said a month, 3 weeks ago, if we had said, "Hey, Jets at Packers straight up,"
Yeah,
you
totally,
can bet whatever you
totally.
want and no points involved. You'd
Yeah.
be like, "What do we got?"
Yep.
How much am I
And-
allowed to bet?
So I do think though the fundamentals are great for the Bills. They are what we thought they were, right? I mean, they're pretty much what we thought they were going to be. So you don't really see a thing that's a vulnerability. There's not anything really fraudulent about them.
So, ultimately, we appreciate you very much, Mike. This has been great for everybody in the chat and everybody listening here. You can find Mike's Quarterback Tiers article, a link to the Football GM podcast that he hosts with former NFL GM Randy Mueller. You can see him on all social media at Sando NFL. I think that's for Twitter, Instagram, and most of your platforms. Anything else you have coming up that you want to let people know about? How about the schedule change for the show?
Yeah, that's right. The Football GM that I do with Randy Miller is on the Athletic Football Show feed, and we are now recording that so that it goes up first thing on Thursday morning. Like it goes up at like 3 a.m. So we recorded that already today for tomorrow, Thursday. Excited about that. It's really fun to do. It's kind of a little bit of a microcosm of what I do with executives throughout the league. It's just Randy and I talking, and everyone gets to listen in. So it's fun.
Yeah, and I won't lie. I complimented you earlier. Very genuinely, one of my favorite podcasts. You're one of my favorite writers to be able to follow. So we appreciate your time tonight. It's meant a lot to us, and appreciate you saying nice things about the Bills.
Hey, they've earned it. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your time, Mike. We appreciate it.
Appreciate your time, Mike.
Awesome to be able to chat with him, and make sure you guys check that out. We put the links in the show description here. It's fun to get somebody from the outside, and it's a little bit easier
awesome
to bring people in to say nice things about the Bills, because most people are saying nice things about the Bills, but it's still nice to be able to hear it.
It is. Well, first of all, I would like to send some flowers here your way on getting that nice guest here for us on the bye week. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes here and getting guests and getting the show together. And so kudos to you. That was a fantastic guest to pull in for us. So I just wanted to acknowledge your hard work in front of everyone and tell everyone how much I appreciate you, Greg.
Oh, you're so kind.
But you know what? I want people to appreciate us. And in order to appreciate us, how can they appreciate us, Greg? Can you tell them?
You can come appreciate us. Everybody asks all the work that we do, everything that we do, all the research that we do when we come up with these crazy numbers and stats and all the things. It's because we get insight and access to a lot of different things. You guys can help support that by signing up as a One Pass Club member. And you get lots of cool stuff as well. You see this awesome t-shirt that you're able to get. It comes with a decal and a signed, thank you letter and welcome letter from Aaron, Eric, and I. You get members only content that we drop to you guys, different intro videos, Salary Cap 101 for me, all kinds of different stuff that Eric's breaking down, different written articles that are only available to Cover One members. And one of my favorite things, you're able to get access to our Slack channel. And the Slack channel is your own little informed Bills bubble. It's like if you could take Bill's Twitter and just bring people who want to be able to learn more and find more, just the good parts of it. It's fantastic. And the Slack channel on game day is one of the coolest places on earth. So definitely check it out. And it means a lot. And it's the best way. People ask all the time, oh, I love your content. Thanks for everything. How can I help? How can I support? This is it. Signing up for a One Pass membership is that best way to support us.
That is. You know what stinks for me, Greg, is I also do love the Slack channel. Actually, sometimes during the week, I have to totally mute it on my phone so I can
it's addictive.
Get things done. But also during game day, it's the worst because that used to be my favorite part. But then I'm going to put YouTube TV on blast a little bit here. I switched to YouTube TV and I get the locals through them. And I'm like, honestly, I'm like 10 seconds behind, but it is all the difference in the world to be so annoying in the Slack channel because there's people that are either there at the game or whatever it is. And it just blows it for me when I see like just the Slack blow up. So I have to check in at halftime or like known in like a big like challenge timeout. So I don't get to experience during and that's pretty frustrating to me. But it is a good feature for those of you that are watching the game in real time, like the rest of America.
So a couple of the things we wanted to go through here, I thought you had a great idea to be able to kind of talk through some of the things from our side, maybe some players that we think we did the Lofton exercise early on of players you could win with, players that you win because of, and players who aren't, contributed there where you need to get better. We're not going to go through the whole roster, but I'll let you kick off. Maybe who are some guys who have made a difference or moved up or down in a tier for you from where you were preseason?
Well, so just looking at the way that I did, I just kind of went through it this year here to this point.
You feel better about Josh Allen now?
I feel, I mean, I color coordinate all my spreadsheets. And so green is he can win games for us. And that is like the deepest, darkest green you can have around dark. Josh Allen's is actually glowing on my screen right now. But the place that's the most concern for me is the running back room. I got Devin Singletary as you can win with. I kind of just threw James Cook a default you can win with, not knowing enough about him. But ultimately, I feel better that you need better from that entire room. And that's really the conversation that we just had with Mike, right? An outsider kind of viewing the team in the same way. And I think that's something that we all know in self-scouting this team. And another spot on this that is interesting to me is probably on the other side of at the offensive line is a lot of we can win with. I will say.
Agreed.
Like, I feel like
I think there's maybe one or two you can make cases for Dion and Mitch Morris, but they're at the lower end of win for you, at the higher end of can win with.
I feel like it's hard to be there for an offensive lineman, but they're right borderline there. And I'm good there. That I think that's the approach is to have it kind of hang out in that space. If your offensive line's that across the board, we're doing pretty good. The most interesting one to me is linebacker. I think both Tremaine and Milano are same in that vein that you just said about Dion. I had a really tough time is do I put them with they win games for us or that they win with? Because I actually think it's gotten to the point where I think they both as a unit win games for the Buffalo Bills. Because look at this defense. Like the big difference here as we've gotten to the bye is the offense was able to do those things, but the defense is now able to do it at the same level. And I think it's because of the linebackers, in my opinion. Well, the line playing in front of the linebackers, but now unlocking what it is these linebackers can do. Am I turning them to they can win games for us, or am I keeping them at we can win games with those linebackers. Where are you at?
So I've got a couple in a very similar vein. I already wasn't super high on the running backs, and obviously I'm still not. I'm gonna wait. I'm undecided on Dawson Knox, but I will say I was more optimistic and was hoping for more from Dawson Knox than we've seen. Obviously the tragedy with his brother, the injuries that he's had. I'll wait. I'm not.
There's only one ball going around to a lot of people.
There's only so much you can do. But I will say I was expecting more than what we've seen. Yep. Similarly, some pieces on the offensive line. I think Spencer Brown has been better than I expected, but I think both Ryan Bates and Roger Saffold have been a little bit less than what I expected.
And I saw him in the comments here at some point, so I don't know if he's still watching or not. Joe Marino brought up a good point. I think it was on WGR, sort of about the gauntlet of interior linemen that they have gone through here early in the season, and kind of taking some of those bruises here early on and kind of getting through it. I think it gets a little bit better for them, and they're solidifying themselves as that interior line going forward. So there might be something in there that I think like that gauntlet, when you look back at it, was really tough. And when he said that, I was like, dang. You talk about Simmons and Aaron Donald,
Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones,
Hayward. What a
first 6 games. That's ridiculous.
That's tough. So maybe
even
you took your lumps early.
Like Christian
Wilkins,
Miami,
Christian Wilkins,
Wilkins, literally every game you're talking about like a significant,
and that is the world of the NFL. But I think that's a tough gauntlet for those guys. But just not to take away from what you're saying there, but Joe said that this morning, and it made me think like, man, it really was a gauntlet for those guys.
Yeah. On the defensive side of the ball, it's mostly the other direction. So I put out a string of tweets earlier about Daquan Jones.
Yeah,
Daquan Jones is, by almost every available metric, is the number one tech in the NFL. Not playing really well, not elite, like the number one. He's like, when you look at those metrics they put out for defensive tackles on win rate versus double team rate. It's Aaron Donald and Daquan Jones in their own area, and then everybody else in the NFL in a big lump. So that's anytime you're in the realm of Aaron Donald in any metric, that is an incredibly positive thing. But then you add to that, why do you think we're seeing the seasons we are from the linebackers? Because we have a guy who sucks up 80% of the snaps getting double teamed and is still winning despite getting double teamed. He also has really good numbers from tackles. PFF does stops, and a couple fans asked what stops are. So tackles are exactly what you think, just bringing the ball carrier down. A stop is when you tackle the ball carrier on first or second down at 40% of the yards needed. So on 1st and 10, a 4-yard gain or less. On 3rd and 4th down, you make a tackle that stops them from converting a first down. So that's like a win from a defensive standpoint. You don't give up anything negative from those. He has 8 of those, which is one of the highest numbers for defensive tackles. He's been in on 3 sacks. So he's only credited, depending on where you go, what the count is. And then the reason that we have the number 1 pass defense and the number 1 run defense and the number 1 DVOA, he's a huge contributor to that. So he's a big one for me that I think now is, pushing into that can win games for you tier, which is hard to do from a 1 tech. I had made the case a lot of times that it was more so kind of defending Tremaine Edmunds as much as it was anything with Milano, but I had made the case about how they were way closer to the same linebacker than different.
Right.
I'm happy with Tremaine Edmunds. I think he's taken a small step forward. Matt Milano is playing at an elite level. I think Matt Milano is playing at an incredibly high level. I know some people nitpicked about giving up targeted catches against Travis Kelce this week, and I think PFF graded him poorly, which is silly.
Oh, did they? That's
it's
interesting.
Shocking.
That PFF got grades. Cool.
Matt Milano is playing at legitimately an all-pro level. I know Peter King said that he was the best linebacker in the league that doesn't get enough credit. I think he could get some flowers this year that we haven't seen before. And one more, I had DeMar Hamlin as a guy that you needed to improve from. I'm now comfortable that he's a guy you can win with.
Gregory.
I think he's a guy where I was very concerned when Micah Hyde
Give me some flowers, Gregory. Give me some flowers. Talk to me.
He's not Micah Hyde. We've seen some flaws here, but it's not the significant concern that I thought it was when he first came in, that I thought he was a guy quarterbacks were going to pick on and take advantage of. And his ability to play within the scheme has been incredibly reassuring to me.
You keep going on DeMar if you want. We can
No,
talk
you-
about this for a
you
while.
were right.
I feel pretty good.
You were right.
I was
You were
right about
right.
it. Dude,
You were.
I'll tell you what, that I won't fluff my horn too much, but there's nobody that knows adequate defensive backs better than your boy. There's nobody that knows somebody that could come in and fill in and make you happy.
Yeah.
And DeMar Hamlin's, I'm glad you gave him his flowers. There's
No,
somebody, you know what?
He deserves it. He deserves it.
You know where he does. I think he's still gonna have some lumps to take, and Twitter will come after him.
We've
At
seen,
some points here.
he misses a couple
missed
of
the big
tackles.
tackle,
He
yeah.
takes some angles I don't love, but he's not this huge
still the number one
liability
defense
that I thought.
after losing Micah Hyde, and you saw what Jaquan Johnson did, right? So you saw what it could be. It could be a lot worse. One that, you know, in your vein of talking here, and while we're looking at it, that I need to probably bump up some flowers, because I've been hard on him on Twitter. I've been hard on him on this show. Jordan Phillips. I chalked up a lot of his success previously here to anomalous randomness, but he fills a role, and when he's been hurt, it's noticeable him being out of the defense, and that role that he fills is fantastic. The fit with him in this defense is fantastic. The energy he brings, he's converted me. He really has. It's sort of actually a little bit the opposite Isaiah. I was as hard as I am on Jordan as I have been on Isaiah, but Jordan has actually won me over 100%. I'm a big fan of Jordan. I want him healthy and contributing to this team all the time. So hats off to you, Jordan. I've moved him up to the we can win with him. I used to have him as a we need better. I thought he was just another rotational piece, but at this point, I really need him in this lineup. I think he's a key part of what they're doing in that interior rush. So.
How about one I'll throw at you that we didn't exactly prepare in this way? Anyone that you are going to predict makes another step forward that we haven't seen yet, and I'll let you think while I have one.
Yeah.
I've had questions, people pushing back about, oh man, we haven't seen much from Ed Oliver yet. It is purely a matter of time. It is when, not if, we will see a huge breakout from Ed Oliver. They've held back a ton of his snaps. He was injured. We missed him for basically like 3/4 of the game so far. And then the couple games he did play, they were really careful with his snaps. Now this bye week, and then what we've seen already with the attention and gravity Von Miller's pulling, we are going to see some big breakouts from Ed Oliver down these final 11 games into the playoffs.
Absolutely. The injury to him has been the most frustrating one to me, because I was blasting that this was going to be a breakout season for him, and for that immediately out of the gate for him to have this type of injury, for him too, that type of load that these interior guys play with, especially him, the way he plays and takes on some of those double teams and things like that, that type of pressure that it puts on the ankle. So I'm hoping that he gets back to where he was, and then I really just want him healthy in January, even though I want him to have this huge, massive breakout season. But I agree.
One other good one here for the same category you gave Phillips for Daryl. I was very much on like, hey, maybe Shaq is just a game day inactive and a scratch and the ninth guy. He's legitimately contributed plays.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give it that. So to answer your question though, who can continue to go? I think DeMar is going to put together a nice season, kind of touch on where you were. I think Khalil Shakir, can make a jump into solidifying himself as, if they aren't able to make a move for Odell Beckham Jr., or maybe just the future of that slot position. I think that he does all the things they want him to do. And I still think Isaiah McKenzie's limited. And I still think Isaiah McKenzie presents some of the concerns that I have. And so I think there's an opportunity there for Khalil Shakir to take some of it if he can. I think he's got at least the makeup and everything I've seen. I think he can provide more if given the opportunities. So if opportunities come his way, I think he can do something with it. I think he's got about a month here. If he can show maybe a little bit more, maybe the Bills can pump the brakes on the Odell thing. But I think in about a month, Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be a Buffalo Bill. And then it's going to be hard to get some of those touches at the slot. So I think we have another mini slot competition here for a month until a decision has to be made. And then on the other side of the ball, I think Kaiir Elam, once Trey White comes back and the defense is able to play some different stuff, and the athleticism for Elam's about ready to pop off, and you can hide some stuff into the other parts of the defense, I think it's going to give him the boost in confidence that he needs. And I think you'll start to see more of the separation between Elam and Dane Jackson and Benford in the type of high-end athleticism and why he was a first rounder versus these other guys.
Yeah, it's a great call. We knew there was going to be development curve and that his upside was there, but it wasn't going to be immediate. And I do think that we'll see more of that as we go. So anything else that we want to go into?
Yeah, so I wanted
we
to
do
talk.
some of ours?
I wanted to sort of drift this conversation of who's kind of up and down. I didn't want to necessarily do stock up, stock down because a lot of people are doing that type of thing. But you're a cap guy. You're looking ahead. You're our Brandon Bean, our GM. In sort of the vein in these conversations that we're talking about, has anyone to you that is either coming up on, we know there's a number of guys that are coming up on contracts now that are playing for contracts this year, that are coming up on contracts over the next year or two that could be up for some extensions, who has increased their value, increased the urgency to get a deal done, or maybe the other way, decrease? Where are you at with some of the ongoing open negotiations that we see?
So there's a couple interesting ones that we'll go through. Some of the easier ones that, I think it's just a matter of time before we see something with Ed Oliver. I think that he's on his 5th-year option next year. There's not a lot of urgency. I think that'll come in time. There's a couple that I'm really torn on, and there are obviously 3 of the other ones we've thrown out there. So I'll go through the Singletary, Poyer, and Edmonds. So Singletary is going to be a philosophical test for Brandon Bean. We have not seen him spend material money on a running back. Devin Singletary is not a guy who's going to break the bank. So now you have a situation where, okay, so how much is it going to be? What's that line? Obviously, I think if it's 3-4 million, that's easy. 5 million is maybe. You get to 6 million. If you had a team offer a 3-year, $18 million deal, I don't think the Bills do that. I think that. I don't think so. So I think there is a number, obviously if you get to where it's 3 years, 12 million, that's $4 million a year. I think that's something we could do. I think that he's a serviceable guy. I would prefer him as a 1B instead of a 1A, but there's a number there. I'm still in the belief that we probably see Devin Singletary walk, but I think there's a number where it could happen.
I would say he's probably also kept his value neutral.
Yeah, correct.
Like he has not increased or decreased. Yeah, no change of value.
I can't decide if Jordan Poyer has dramatically changed it. He had a little bit of an injury situation. You now have the uncertainty about the long-term future of Micah Hyde, whereas before you kind of had more of a safety blanket that, well, if we still have Micah under contract next year, so we could bring one other safety along. Now, I mean, I hope that we see Micah Hyde again, but anytime you have neck injuries, there's no guarantees. We saw Eric Wood thought he was going to play, and that ended, very tragically from a football standpoint.
Yeah. But at this point, though, what we do know is that Micah is on the recovery side of surgery.
Correct.
And so that's a good sign that he's had the surgery and that the doctors think it's a good recovery. So
agreed.
Good news on that front.
Very much possible. But again, it's added a degree of uncertainty that we
more
didn't have
context
before.
to this. Yes.
So does that become a factor in? Does that, in my mind, it somewhat increases the need to bring back a Jordan Poyer. But then we've added Poyer's had a list of multiple injuries to this point. He had the elbow, he's had the ribs, he's had multiple other things, which is
the mileage is looking worse. Even though people said his mileage was different, now you're getting dinged up mileage this year.
Yeah. So there's a situation now where I don't know exactly where that puts it, and I don't know what that does to his value in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So I still think that there's a pretty healthy number that he could get short term, and I'm still comfortable with what I projected before of 2 years and 25 million, with honestly a fair amount of it guaranteed, that he feels good that he's going to get both of those years.
Right.
It's year 32 and year 33 for him. I think it's doable. I'm still comfortable with that. There's just so much uncertainty that I don't know. And it's gone both directions with him and with Micah, that I'm still comfortable with that, but I don't feel any more certain that it's going to happen. I think that there's still risk.
If the Bills feel confident in Micah's recovery, do you think DeMar Hamlin playing at an acceptable level hurts Jordan's ability to negotiate? Like that, because to me, DeMar was always Poyer Jr. in that sort of development role. I saw him as that guy, and that the fact that he's coming in and playing in a way well and playing to an NFL standard well, if Hyde is going to be okay, does that accelerate that plan for the Bills to feel a little more confident and hurt that value, at least with Buffalo?
Correct. It doesn't hurt him in a marketplace standpoint, but it's one more notch in the leverage that Bean has in his ability to hold tight.
And to your point, Poyer is better. I'm not trying to make that case, but if the floor is like, okay, we can live in this floor if you walk away, that gives them a little more leverage.
It does. Absolutely. I don't know if it's the difference, but it is a factor. It is a piece of it.
Yeah. Interesting to watch.
Yeah. Yes. Very, very interesting. Yeah. The hardest one for me is Tremaine Edmonds. I was hoping / predicting that we would see a bigger step forward. I think he's been better. I think he's improved from where he was before. I also think that improvement is pretty directly correlated to Daquan Jones and the defensive tackles in front of him. I was hopeful that we would see the consistency and the flashes, and I don't know that we have. So that puts me in a spot where I've consistently said I would like it to be 12.5, 13 million. And if I could keep him in that ballpark where it's 4 years, 52 million, I'm comfortable with 13 million a year. But I always thought a team was going to throw 15, 16 million dollars at him because he's a freak and checked every single box from a scouting standpoint. I think Joe Marino, that you referenced, had him as his third overall player. There are other GMs who also had him as their third overall player in that draft. He's still, the age thing is a constant joke in Buffalo. Other GMs will tell themselves, well, hey,
we still got 2 full deals.
We can give him a 5-year deal and see all 5 years.
Yeah, and still get some more out of it.
So my apprehension has never been about his fit, about him as a leader on this team. The great play that came out that showed him having the sight adjustment on Kelsey moving in and calling that out on that play that got broken down. Those are the things that don't get identified. I've always been comfortable with paying him and bringing him back at our number. I was worried somebody else would throw a big number out there, and the big number, I do start to get concerned about, can we afford to have 25, 26, 27 million dollars combined per year at the linebacker position? I'm not sure we can. What we've seen so far, it almost reassures me that he's not gonna get that Godfather offer from someone else, and maybe we can get him back at a better number than what Bills fans think.
I'm actually surprised you're not higher on Tremaine. I'm much higher on Tremaine than you are. I think that he's definitely caused a conversation at one Bills drive that is forcing Bean to maybe get out of a comfort zone for what he wanted. I think they've definitely made an offer to Tremaine and his people.
Of course.
I think Tremaine and his people did a good job in betting on Tremaine. I think he looks good, and I think league-wide his value's increased. He's not making the splash plays, you're right. I think he is playing at a higher level with consistency. I do think some of that is playing behind Daquan Jones. The stats show that Jones is providing that spark to him. But I also think you look at some of the responsibility that the Bills put on both these linebackers in run support and getting the defensive line in position, and the way they defend gaps. We've talked to players who say this is really difficult, and the responsibility that they put on these linebackers. And so some of the stuff isn't going to show up in some of the splash plays, but also for Tremaine, what doesn't show up is the plays that aren't made because of that length at every level of this defense. You have Groot and his length and his crazy limbs flying around, and then you have Tremaine Edmonds and the same thing. And I think it's just too important. And you mentioned all the other reasons, he's a captain and what he means to this team. And the draft pick and the age and the investment they've already put into him. And to me, the value is through the roof. I think he's one of the most important pieces to this team at One Bills Drive going forward. I think he's a lock, in my opinion, for them. I think they're scrambling to a number that maybe they're uncomfortable with too. I think this is going to be a deal that is not going to make Twitter totally happy. I think it'll probably be closer to market than necessarily where our numbers at. And I think they'll make it work and some money will get shifted around. But I do think he's a big part of what they're doing. I'm way higher on him than you are. I agree with you on Milano. I think he's playing lights out, but I think it's in tandem. And I want to keep this together. I think it's really important if we want to see this defense be what we expect them to be. I do think it starts with the linebackers.
No, I think it's totally fair. And I will add controversially, I think I'd rather pay Poyer than Edmonds if I had to choose one of the two.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I still love you, and I don't agree, but I do love you.
You know,
I think let's save that for a segment.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, I'm very comfortable with either. If I had to choose,
if I had to take it for like this year and next year.
Yeah, that's part of it too. I think I'd rather commit to a 2-year deal on Poyer than a 5-year deal on Edmonds.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I like Edmonds.
Well, we'll see. I hope that he makes that an easy decision the rest of the season, and that we see even more than what's there of how this is going to be approached.
Sure.
And I will say, everyone I read off tonight, including Gabe Davis, which people bring up, he's still a long ways off too. He's this year and next year.
Even talk about that.
We got plenty more for that. He'll be more of a discussion next year. Yeah. They can make all of it work. I can play with the numbers and find ways to build creative contracts, just like they did with Von Miller, just like they did with Stephon
and in like
Diggs.
2 years, it's going to get silly, and Greg's going to be like, our hair's on fire, and we are loaning off against the world, but it doesn't matter because we're going on our third ring chase, right?
And I tell people, everybody talks about the TV deal, and the TV deal is a big deal, and that's why there's going to be big increases. What they're missing is there is now the TV deal was planned for. They already planned for it to be 15, 20, maybe even $25 million increases because of the huge new TV deal. What they didn't plan on was enormous increases in gambling revenue. And the gambling revenue is going to take that $15 million increase and make it 20. And the 20 is going to make it like 28. And the 25 is now going to be a 35 and $40 million increase in 1 year. And instead of hitting 250 and 270 million in 6 and 7 years, we're going to hit those numbers in like 3 and 4 years.
Yeah. And Michael Parsons is going to make 70 million a year.
And I can tell you that I am 100% sure that Brandon Beane is planning on that, because I can see it in how he's structuring these contracts and how he's building in out clauses of being able to bump cap down the line because he sees the increases coming.
Yeah, I think there is going to be much ado about nothing in terms of people scrambling of we have to replace all these things, we have to do all these things. I think much of it will line up nicely. And those that don't, there's going to be some hard conversations coming up. I think Jordan Poyer will probably be one of those hard conversations if a Super Bowl doesn't get him to take a better deal to stay with the team. But it's going to be rare. That will be like one of the few hard conversations. Then you'll get 6 guys back. Right. Like, and that's going to kind of be the world I think the Bills exist in, is where you bring back 5 or 6 of your own guys, but then you lose one that's maybe your favorite that help you get to here along the way. But I'll take 6 for 1 all day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this has been, I think, a really good discussion and something that we'll continue on, but is always fun to do here in the off season.
Now's the time to do it, right?
One last thing that, we put Mike on the spot. I think we need to put ourselves on the spot here. Let's both put out what we feel our record is going to be these final 11 games. What do we predict the final record is going to be for the 17-game regular season for the Buffalo Bills? I'll give you the choice of whether you want me to lead off or whether you want
to go for it. You go for it.
I think Mike was very sound. He didn't actually say it, but he obviously kind of indicated that he was predicting 14-3. I think he was picking out 2 losses, one during the stretch and then one of the final 2 when it doesn't matter. So I think 14-3 is absolutely a viable, logical. I'll even say the most likely number. I think if you look at most metrics, if we just keep winning at the same clip that we're winning now, percentage wise, I think Sean McDermott is going to have this team incredibly focused, incredibly on, exactly on the ball for what they want and how it's going to be handled. I think that he is going to hammer home that Jacksonville game. And I always include the Atlanta game because that was a really poorly played game for how everything is handled. And that, hey, we can't let that happen again. The opener against Pittsburgh, all the other pieces.
Yeah.
I think that that's exactly what he's going to hammer home. And I think there's really a chance that they go on a pretty special run here. I think 15-2 is in play. And I think that there's a chance that they're going to be the don't blink thing and the constant focus of the next game that guys like Von Miller are talking about constantly, I think is going to put them into a position where they're not going to have some of the previous, slogs and, unexplained impacts that we've had before, and that they're going to be cleaner than what we've seen. So I'm going to go with 15-2, and that the one loss is going to be more late in the season because we have things wrapped up and are resting guys.
So I'm gonna take it prediction and say, like, I'm not gonna go on the odds of what's gonna happen because I agree with you. Like, statistically, it's NFL. Something wonky is gonna happen. They're gonna lose a game. I'm looking at this schedule, knowing the team
Super
that this
hard to pick
is.
one.
Yeah, knowing what this team is, if they can stay healthy, what I'm looking at on paper, and I cannot pick a loss remaining here.
Yeah.
I would have them going 16-1 throughout. If I was Howard Simon on WGR and I do Howard Picks the Bills and I go through each one of these, I can't talk myself into Bills losing any one of these games unless something happens. And I'm not going to predict that to happen. So I have them going here 16-1. And I do think the caveat is to what you said, whereas if it's Case Keenum lining up with a bunch of
final
scrubs,
game against the Patriots, because the game doesn't matter for us.
Yeah, if there still remain 2 games up on everybody and there's no meaning to putting anybody out there, okay, then I'll take that loss. But I think heads up, if they're healthy going up against any one of these teams in a game that matters to the Buffalo Bills, I think not only are they going to win, but I think that they are 10-point favorites in all these games.
Yeah. And I think it's like that for a reason. And our correspondent tells us every time we ask.
Buffalo Bills going undefeated. And we're going to the Super Bowl. Yeah,
that's right.
He knows.
Yeah. The weather's the only thing to be done. But I will say the only thing, to your point and to the point Mike made, there were flaws in this 5-1 start.
Yeah, there's actually plenty of ugly, sloppy play during it.
And there are going to be games where that ugly, sloppy play they aren't able to recover from in the same way. They'll slip up somewhere with that type of stuff. They got to clean that kind of thing up. So they're not perfect. And the thing is if anyone's going to beat the Bills on this roster, it's going to be themselves.
Yeah,
right. They're going to come into a game and sloppily throw it away.
They can have an ugly game against the Lions. They can have an ugly game against Chicago, and it won't matter. It's if they have the ugly game against the Vikings, or they have the ugly game against the Packers, or they have the ugly game against the Bengals. Even the Jets have shown enough talent on their roster that if you play really poorly, they now have enough guys that they could take advantage if you play pretty poorly.
Correct.
So it'd be really poorly because it's the Jets, but ultimately it's going to be that combination. You're spot on that none of them are going to be the reason that you lose. It's that they play really poorly and ugly and a bunch of weird turnovers, and those guys play out of their minds, and you get a crazy.
Yeah, you're getting the best of everyone for sure. You're getting the best of every team in the NFL at this point.
So any final thoughts here?
Yeah. What do you got going on going forward here, Greg? Where are we at?
So there's a weird combination. I know I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and one is always Bill Simmons and Cousin Sal, and they were joking that this is the ultimate like apple picking weekend. Like if you got to sacrifice one football weekend for the entire year for your spouse, and like at some point you got to sacrifice one, this is the one. It's the Vikings are on, the Bills are on bye, the Rams are on bye, the Vikings are on bye. It's a bunch of really good teams on bye, and the remaining matchups suck.
Is there
There's like no good games.
Isn't
this
apple
weekend.
picking season already over? It's like October
I
19th.
don't know.
No, Bill, don't listen to Bill Simmons and Cousin Sal on this, buddy. I'm telling you, apple picking season, I think was like a week ago.
I'm not going to go pick apples anyway.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be too cold. I think they're frozen.
Whatever you need to do, if you have to sacrifice one
my
weekend
wife
for
gave me
Christmas
a
shopping
list.
or whatever it might be to a honeydew list, and
I
you're
got
like,
a honeydew list. My in-laws are coming to town. I got this is I actually it lined up perfectly. It's my son's birthday today. Is one of my son's birthday. Yeah, and so we're celebrating over the weekend, which actually selfishly lined up perfectly with a buy, Greg. And now I get to do all this family stuff and actually look like I'm a good, caring husband and father, and just have Red Zone on in the background, and I don't have to like get upset and ruin everything over the Bills.
Yeah. We will say, make sure you check it out. I think Uber Hansen is doing a really good breakdown of like rooting interests and what things to look for, some preview things. We might do a little something with him to share some of that. There's some good things going on, but yeah, I rolled through like trying to find the game of the week. I don't even know what, like, I guess Seahawks Chargers. I take that back. At 425, Chiefs 49ers is a legit good game. I will watch Chiefs 49ers.
That could bury the Chiefs a little bit too.
It's in San Francisco too.
Yeah,
it's in San Francisco. So it's a fun one to root for. So obviously, we're rooting for that. We're rooting for the Seahawks over the Chargers.
I would say also with the San Fran one, I think you maybe want San Fran to win, but also their defense to perform poorly, so that the Bills' defense stats are remain higher than
keep them DVOA and the highest scoring available. So
keep them
let's have the 49ers win like 35-32.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
So make sure you guys check it out. We have a lot of good stuff going on. You guys are great in the chat tonight. Big, huge thank you to having Mike Sando on, great guest to be able to come through. I thought he was awesome here tonight.
Yeah.
Carl had go into a game here. Lots of people getting ready. There's going to be some fantastic things to be able to look at. So make sure you guys are checking it out. We mentioned it earlier. Make sure you sign up for the Cover One Pass. And right now, if you've been enjoying this show and you've enjoyed what you're doing, stop what you're doing right now. Go and press the like button. Please press the like button.
We need it.
That's literally how the YouTube algorithm lets other people know about the show. So stop what you're doing right now. Go and press the like button. You can do it like with your thumb or your finger, or your nose, like wherever it is.
Here.
They're somewhere in that area.
I don't think it's where Greg's pointing, but it's down here somewhere.
I don't know how anything works. But whatever you need to do, go and press that button and do that. We appreciate you. But ultimately, we're going to be excited. There's going to be some things going on still this weekend, even though we won't have our normal post-game show. There's going to be some cool Cover One content. Aaron and I have been kicking around a couple other ideas of things we can bring to you. And then next week, we'll be right back at it, previewing the Green Bay Packers game, bringing on a special guest there to be able to talk through what's going on there.
Trey White week, maybe?
Yes, Trey White coming back. Hey, the best news I got for you, Aaron. This is our last primetime game for a nice stretch. We got one more night game that we got to survive, and then we get
it's a nice slate of
6 straight games of
breakfast sandwiches,
1 o'clock football. Oh, it's awesome! I love 1 o'clock football. It's so nice.
All
right, man. We appreciate it. Again, you guys were awesome in the chat. Thank you guys for everything. On behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Thompson. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.